Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Anshula and today I'm sharing with you a Philadelphia bookstore vlog. So I actually went to Philadelphia a year ago. It feels like it's been a billion years already, but it was in February of 2020. We were staying with this amazing Airbnb hostess. Her name was Kristen. She was so sweet and she had so many recommendations of things to do in her neighborhood, which was Germantown. And one of those recommendations was a place called Uncle Bobbie's, which is a coffee shop and a bookstore. It is one of my hands down favorite bookstores that I've ever been to. If I had to make a list of the top 10 best bookstores that I have been to across the US, Uncle Bobbie's would be on that list. That is how much I love this bookstore.
Can I dance for you? Would that be cool? Can I dance for you? Would that be cool? Butterflies in my stomach, butterflies in my chest. Heartbeat like a bird that's humming. Trust your words cause you know me best. Let's take a walk down a brick road. Click your heels and you'll be there. I want you, do you want me to? Once you hear the rhythm playing, promise you won't be complaining. I'll be here fully if it's for you. Once my body gets to swaying, promise you won't be complaining. And I'll be saying,
Uncle Bobbie's is a bookstore owned by Marc Lamont Hill, who is a Temple University professor. He is also an activist and he owns a podcast called Coffee and Books, which is really interesting. He brings a lot of different authors for these really unique discussions. The bookstore title comes from his real life Uncle Bobbie, who fostered his love of reading growing up. So I think that's really, really sweet. If you're looking for African American literature, Blacklit, this is one of the best bookshops to find it. Right when you walk in, you see this really incredible light fixture. It's surrounded by these curled up pieces of paper. It was just one of the most interesting little details that I've ever seen in a bookstore. I would not describe this bookstore as quiet. It felt like a party, like just a party of people just enjoying the atmosphere of a bookstore, and I loved it. It also serves the best hot chocolate that I've had in my lifetime. I have tried a million times to recreate it and I have never been able to recreate it. It's like, it was this oat milk hot chocolate and I went back in day after day after day just to order this hot chocolate. This bookstore is also walking distance from the Black Writers Museum. This was hands down my favorite museum when I went to Philadelphia. I've raved about it so many times, like not just on Instagram, but also on my website. I love this museum to pieces. If you're a museum lover, it's just very interesting how they selected the specific pieces and what they chose to showcase. So just read through everything in this museum because there's so much like weight to each individual thing that was selected. It was very, very purposeful and meaningful. Upstairs, there's also a library and they have such an amazing selection of books by Black authors. So highly recommend the Black Writers Museum. Let's get into the books that I hauled. The first book that I got was The Street by Ann Petry. This book follows Ludi Johnson, a hardworking African American mother who is in a street in Harlem, and it is a very unsparing depiction of a woman trying to follow the American dream. I think this book did such a fantastic job of flitting between characters' perspectives. It was very seamless. The thoughts of these different people were so radically different and they completely ranged in how they approached their perspective to life, but the transition didn't feel very harsh. It was very, very well done and you were able to hop back and forth between these perspectives in a tight manner. I think this book also did a really great job with the characterization because we have so many characters within this book in the street, but not only do you feel the rawness of the characters, but the street itself is its own insidious character that affects all of these people. It's not really like explicitly a character, but the way that the street is written about, you can feel its presence, and it's kind of like this gnawing creepiness about this street throughout the whole book. I mean, there were also characters in this book whose perspectives I didn't think I was going to be interested in at the start when I was reading it, like men, and then they became like characters that I was very deeply invested in by the end of the book. It is a very uncomfortable book to read, but I think it's also very important, but it's also the kind of book that you can read in a day because the plot is very tight and it's very sequential. Even though they're flashbacks, it's easy to follow along. It's a book that is gonna make you angry and frustrated and sad, but it's also a very important book to read, and I just think the author did such a great job with executing this story. It's a literary roller coaster, and there's so much that's so well done about this book. I love this book. Ann Petry is now one of my favorite authors, and I want to read every single thing that she's written. The next book that I ended up picking up was An Orchestra of Minorities by Chigozie Obioma. This is a very tragic story inspired by Homer's Odyssey. This book is one that I ended up DNFing because the story wasn't for me personally. It was very meandering and it really took its time to start to develop, and there were just certain things about the story that I realized it was not going to be a book that I was gonna end up finishing, and I didn't want to feel like I was forcing myself through the book. That being said, I absolutely love this author's writing. This book was listed for the Man Booker Prize, and his writing is impeccable. Like, it is so beautiful. So I ended up getting a different book by him, and that was The Fisherman. That was his debut novel. I love this book. We are following a set of brothers and their family, but it's also a story about how narratives define us. This book is a very loose Cain and Abel retelling. It is not very much like Cain and Abel, though there are Cain and Abel-esque elements and there are references to that. It reminded me a lot of Things Fall Apart, and in fact, Things Fall Apart is referenced in the book, which made me all the more excited. It had the same rhythm of Chinua Achebe's poetry. I have not read the African trilogy, which is what he's more well known for, but I love his poetry to pieces. I think he's a brilliant author as well. The first sentence of each chapter in The Fisherman parallels each other, and how it morphs also plays into the story. Every single sentence, down to the sentence structure, was so deliberate, and I was living for it. Chigozie Obioma is just such a talented writer, and he has these like mad writing skills that I just wanted to breathe in the sentences because some of them were so good and they were so visceral. The Fisherman is set in the 1990s, and it's interesting because our main character is only 9 years old, but because of all the events that are happening in his life, he feels so much older. Oftentimes I found myself forgetting the fact that he was only 9 because of all the hard things that he had to see. It was just about one specific family unit, but that story really transcended in meaning. It was just one metaphor for a lot of different topics that the author wanted to talk about, and I just thought it was just so brilliantly done. There was one more book that I picked up in Philly, and it was from a museum gift shop, and I couldn't help myself, and that is this lovely copy of The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. I was expecting it to be a little more like Frozen. That is not the case at all. I think the only similarity that this has with Frozen is 1, the fact that there is a Snow Queen, 2, there's a strong sibling relationship in this book, and that is where the similarities to Frozen begin and end. And I should know better by now. I should know that Disney takes liberties with its storytelling. Hans Christian Andersen's books aren't as dark as like maybe Brothers Grimm fairy tales, but this one was surprisingly and delightfully dark for a fairy tale, but it also had some very heavy religious motifs that I thought were really interesting. This is illustrated by Sana Anuka, and I think she did such a lovely job with the illustrations. They're very abstract, but they're also done in a way that takes this story and makes it a little bit darker. When we were exploring the museum, I saved the library for last. They have an area of the museum called the Nord Library, and if you love bookstores and libraries, you will love this particular location. It's an academic library, but I just really enjoyed the ambiance of it, and I enjoyed poking through and seeing what kind of books that they had. It just wrapped up the whole experience. Those are all of the books that I got in Philly. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys.
Can I dance for